Picture yourself astride a mighty warhorse, thundering across the sun-scorched sands of the Holy Land with 30 brother knights at your side. Your white mantle streams behind you like a banner of righteousness, while the weight of your sword reminds you that you are both monk and warrior, prayer and steel forged into one deadly instrument of divine will. But this is not where your story begins. Before the legendary cavalry charges that would shake the earth, before the castle sieges that would echo through history, before your name would be whispered in both fear and reverence across 3 continents, you were simply a young man who heard an impossible call, to live perfectly, to serve completely, and to sacrifice everything for something greater than yourself. Tonight, journey back 800 years to discover what it truly meant to be a Knight Templar. Not the myths or legends, but the real life. The bone-deep exhaustion after 18 hours in the saddle, the moment when your sword finds its mark in desperate combat, the profound silence of pre-dawn prayers that sustained you through unimaginable hardships. You are about to experience the most extraordinary life a medieval man could live. From humble beginnings in a French monastery to the blood-soaked battlefields of Outremer, from protecting terrified pilgrims on bandit-infested roads to defending massive stone fortresses against impossible odds. This is the story of men who changed the world by refusing to compromise, who became legends by choosing the hardest path imaginable. Close your eyes now and let the centuries fall away. The year is 1180, and you have just taken vows that will define every moment of your existence until death. The white mantle settles on your shoulders like destiny itself, and your real adventure is about to begin. The monastery bell tolls in the darkness, its bronze voice echoing across the stone walls of your commandery in the rolling hills of Champagne. It is matins, still hours before sunrise, and like your brother knights throughout Christendom, you rise immediately from your simple straw mattress. There is no lingering in the warmth of woolen blankets, no gradual awakening. A Templar's day begins with discipline. Your cell is austere, bare stone walls, a wooden crucifix, a small window that in daylight reveals the countryside beyond. By the light of a single candle, you dress in the layers that will define your day. First, the rough linen undergarments that remind you of mortality and humility. Then the padded acquitone that will cushion your body should you need to don armor. Finally, the white habit of your order, pure as freshly fallen snow, symbolizing the purity of purpose that should guide every action. Archaeological evidence from Templar sites across Europe reveals how remarkably uniform this daily routine was. Whether in a commandery in Portugal, a preceptory in England, or a fortress in the Holy Land, every Templar followed essentially the same schedule, bound together by their rule, a document that prescribed not just their spiritual duties, but the minutiae of daily life with extraordinary detail. You join your brother knights in the chapel, where the day officially begins with the chanting of matins. The ancient Latin words flow like water over stone, worn smooth by 8 centuries of repetition. Deus in adjutorium meum intend, O God, come to my assistance. Your voice joins with dozens of others, creating a harmonic resonance that seems to make the very stones vibrate with devotion. The chapel itself tells the story of your order's evolution. Originally, the Knights Templar began in 1119 when 9 French knights approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, requesting permission to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. They were granted quarters in what was believed to be Solomon's Temple, hence their name. What started as a small group of devout warriors had grown into one of medieval Europe's most powerful organizations. After matins comes the most profound moment of your day, personal prayer. In the silence that follows the communal chanting, you kneel before the altar and enter into intimate dialogue with the divine. Here, in these quiet moments, the weight of your vows settles upon you like a familiar cloak. Poverty, you own nothing beyond your basic necessities. Chastity, you have renounced the companionship of women and the comforts of family life. Obedience, your will is no longer your own, but subject to your superiors and ultimately to God. These were not merely symbolic commitments. Historical records from the Templar trials reveal how seriously these vows were taken. Knights who violated them faced severe punishment, including expulsion from the order, a fate worse than death for men who had dedicated their lives to this calling. As dawn begins to lighten the eastern sky, you hear the gentle sounds of the commandery awakening. The stable master tends to the destriers, those magnificent warhorses that were as crucial to a knight's effectiveness as his sword or lance. Each horse represented a significant investment. A good destrier could cost as much as a peasant family might earn in several years. The horses are groomed with the same meticulous care that you apply to your weapons and armor. The morning routine continues with the office of lauds, as the sun crests the horizon. The timing is not coincidental. These prayers are meant to sanctify each part of the day, turning ordinary time into sacred time. Medieval people understood something we often forget, that rhythm and routine, far from being constraining, can actually create a framework for transcendence. Following lauds, you partake in the morning meal, a simple affair of bread, ale, and perhaps some cheese or preserved meat. The rule specifies that you should eat in silence, listening instead to the reading of scripture or the lives of saints. This practice, known as Lectio Divina in monastic tradition, was believed to nourish the soul while the body received its sustenance. The quality of food varied significantly depending on the commandery's location and resources. Archaeological excavations at Templar sites have revealed that while the knights ate simply, they ate well when resources allowed. Evidence of imported spices, quality wine storage, and well-organized kitchens suggests that the order understood the connection between physical health and spiritual vitality. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of these morning hours was their universality. Whether you were stationed at the impregnable fortress of Crac de Chevaliers in Syria, the rolling countryside of Normandy, or the sun-baked plains of Spain, your morning unfolded in precisely the same way. This uniformity created a sense of brotherhood that transcended geography, language, and culture. A Templar knight could travel from Portugal to Palestine and feel immediately at home, because the rhythm of life remained constant. As the morning progresses toward the office of prime, you prepare for the day's work. For some knights, this means administrative duties, managing the vast agricultural estates that funded the order's operations. For others, it means training with weapons, maintaining equipment, or overseeing the complex logistics that kept the order functioning across dozens of countries. The morning light grows stronger, and with it, your sense of purpose crystallizes. You are not merely a warrior or a monk, but something entirely new in medieval society, a synthesis of contemplation and action, prayer and steel, humility and prowess that would define an era and inspire legends that echo still today. The morning sun climbs higher as you make your way to the training grounds, where the real work of becoming a temple knight unfolds. The clash of steel on steel rings across the courtyard, a sound that has become as familiar as the chapel bells, as essential to your daily rhythm as prayer itself. Your training master, Brother Guillaume, is a veteran of the siege of Ascalon, his weathered face bearing a scar that runs from temple to jaw, a memento from a Saracen scimitar that came too close 20 years ago. Under his watchful eye, you begin the morning exercises that will hone your body into an instrument of divine will. Medieval warfare was not the chaotic melee often depicted in popular imagination. Recent scholarship by military historians like David Nicole and Helen Nicholson has revealed that Templar Knights underwent some of the most sophisticated military training of their era. Their effectiveness in battle came not from individual heroics, but from disciplined coordination and relentless practice. You begin with sword work, not the dramatic flourishes of romance, but the precise, economical movements that could mean the difference between life and death in actual combat. The Templar sword, typically weighing between 2 and 3 pounds, was perfectly balanced for both cutting and thrusting. Archaeological examples from sites like the Templar Church at Temple Church in London reveal weapons of remarkable craftsmanship, their steel folded and refolded to achieve a hardness that could cleave through mail while maintaining the flexibility to withstand tremendous impacts. Brother Guillaume calls out corrections in his gravelly voice, "Keep your elbow close to your body, Brother Thomas. Your blade should move like lightning, but your foundation must be stone." The wisdom in his words comes from hard experience. Templar military manuals, preserved in fragments in various European libraries, emphasize that flashy swordplay gets men killed. Effectiveness lies in mastering the basics until they become instinct. The morning progresses to mounted combat training, perhaps the most crucial skill for a knight of your era. Your destrier, a magnificent bay stallion named Tempest, has been your partner for 3 years now. The bond between knight and horse was sacred to the Templars, recognized in their rule, which specified severe punishments for mistreating these noble animals. Mounting in full armor requires its own careful technique. The weight of mail hauberk, coif, and helm, combined with sword, lance, and shield, totals nearly 70 pounds of equipment. Yet you must be able to vault into the saddle with fluid grace, present your lance with unwavering precision, and control your mount with subtle shifts of weight and pressure, since your hands are occupied with weapons. Contemporary accounts from chroniclers like William of Tyre describe Templar cavalry charges as resembling thunderbolts from heaven. This devastating effectiveness came from countless hours of practice, learning to coordinate with your brother knights so that 80 or 100 armored horsemen could strike as one unified force. The psychological impact of such a charge was often as devastating as the physical. Enemy formations would break at the mere sight of Templar knights lowering their lances. But the training went beyond mere physical skill. Brother Guillaume often reminds you that a Templar knight must be prepared to fight not just with sword and lance, but with mind and spirit. The order's military strategies were revolutionary for their time, incorporating intelligence gathering, logistics, and psychological warfare in ways that wouldn't be seen again until the early modern period. Medieval chronicler James of Vitry wrote that the Templars are most prudent in matters of war. They are not troublesome or hasty, but they place their trust in true wisdom and deliberation. This deliberation extended to every aspect of military preparation. Training sessions included tactical discussions, map study, and careful analysis of past engagements. The weapons training continues with the crossbow, a weapon that exemplified the Templar approach to warfare. While many knights considered the crossbow beneath their dignity, the Church had actually banned its use against Christians in 1139, the Templars embraced it as an effective tool. Their crossbow techniques, developed through experience in the Crusades, achieved legendary accuracy. A skilled Templar crossbowman could send a bolt through a male coif at 200 yards. As midday approaches, the training shifts to defensive techniques. You practice with shield and buckler, learning to turn aside blows that would otherwise prove fatal. The Templar shield, with its distinctive red cross on white background, was more than mere protection. It was a symbol of divine favor that could inspire allies and intimidate enemies. The shield work emphasizes something fundamental to Templar philosophy, that defense could be as righteous as attack. While secular knights often sought glory in aggressive action, Templars understood that their primary mission was protection, of pilgrims, of the Holy Land, of Christendom itself. This defensive mindset shaped their tactics, their architecture, and their spiritual outlook. Between training sessions, you tend to your equipment with the same meticulous care you devote to prayer. Every piece of mail is checked for weak links, every weapon edge examined for nicks or dullness. Brother Guillaume often says, "God helps those who help themselves," and God cannot help a knight whose sword breaks at the crucial moment. This equipment maintenance was more than practical necessity, it was spiritual discipline. The rule of the Templars specified that knights must care for their gear as they would for their souls, understanding that negligence in material matters could lead to spiritual failing. Archaeological evidence from Templar sites reveals workshops equipped with forges, anvils, and grinding stones, indicating that each commandery was essentially self-sufficient in maintaining its military equipment. The morning's final training exercise involves group maneuvers, the complex choreography of mounted warfare that made Templar knights so formidable. You practice wheeling movements, the famous, feigned retreat, that could draw enemy forces into devastating counterattacks, and the disciplined formation riding that allowed a relatively small force of Templars to control much larger numbers of opponents. These maneuvers required not just individual skill, but absolute trust in your brother knights. In the heat of battle, your life would depend on the knight beside you maintaining his position, following commands instantly, and placing the mission above personal safety. This trust was built through hundreds of hours of shared training, creating bonds stronger than blood family. As the sun reaches its zenith and the call comes for the office of sext, you lead Tempest back to the stables, your morning's training complete. Your body bears the pleasant exhaustion of hard work, your muscles warm from exercise, your mind sharp from concentration. This is the paradox of Templar life. Through the discipline of war, you find peace. Through the mastery of violence, you serve the cause of order. The training has prepared you not just for battle, but for life itself. The patience, precision, and perseverance required to master arms are the same virtues that will serve you in all aspects of your calling. As Brother Guillaume often reminds his students, we do not train to become killers, but to become protectors. The sword is our tool, but service is our purpose. The afternoon heat shimmers off the dusty road leading from Jaffa to Jerusalem, and you adjust your position in the saddle as your patrol continues its vigilant watch. This is why the temple was founded, to protect pilgrims making their way to the holy city, and today you are fulfilling that sacred mission in its purest form. Behind you stretches a column of perhaps 50 souls, merchants from Venice carrying precious spices, peasant families who have sold everything they owned for this once-in-a-lifetime journey, clergy bearing relics to the holy sites, and a handful of minor nobles seeking both adventure and absolution. Each represents years of planning, sacrifice, and devotion. Your job is to ensure they reach their destination safely. The pilgrimage roads of the 12th century were arteries of faith that connected all of Christendom to its spiritual heart. Modern historian Jonathan Riley Smith's research reveals that hundreds of thousands of pilgrims traveled to the Holy Land during the Crusader period, creating a constant flow of vulnerable humanity that required protection. The Templars developed this protection into both an art and a science. Your patrol consists of 8 knight brothers, 12 sergeants, and 20 Turco-Poles, local Christians who served as light cavalry and guides. This mixed force represents the sophisticated military organization the Templars developed through hard experience. Each element has its role. The knights provide the heavy shock capability, the sergeants handle logistics and support, while the Turco-Poles use their local knowledge to scout ahead and guard the flanks. Brother Marcus, your patrol commander, rides at the front of the column. A 20-year veteran of the Holy Land, he can read the landscape like a manuscript, spotting the subtle signs that might indicate an ambush, the absence of birds near a promising grove, dust clouds on distant ridges, the way local villagers avoid making eye contact. His weathered hands rest easily on his reins, but his eyes never stop moving. The pilgrims themselves are a constant source of wonder and concern. There is Brother Pietro, an elderly monk from Milan who has walked most of the way from Italy, his feet wrapped in bloodied cloth but his spirit undiminished. Lady Eleanor travels in relative comfort with her retinue, fulfilling a vow made during her son's grave illness. Young Henri, barely 16, seeks to follow his father's footsteps to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Each has their story, their reason for enduring the hardships and dangers of this journey. Medieval pilgrimage was not merely tourism. It was a transformative spiritual experience that often represented the most important undertaking of a person's lifetime. Contemporary pilgrimage accounts, like that of the Russian abbot Daniel who visited the Holy Land around 1106, reveal the profound emotional and spiritual impact of these journeys. The road itself tells stories to those who know how to read them. Here, weathered stone markers in multiple languages guide travelers toward Jerusalem. There, the blackened remains of a caravanserai destroyed in a recent raid serve as a grim reminder of the dangers. Ancient Roman milestones still mark distances, testament to the fact that these roads have carried travelers for over 1,000 years. Your training has taught you to see potential threats everywhere. That grove of olive trees could conceal a band of brigands. The rocky outcropping ahead provides perfect cover for archers. Even friendly encounters must be approached with caution. Apparent merchants might be scouts, and helpful locals could be leading you into an ambush. The Templars developed a sophisticated intelligence network throughout the Crusader states. Local contacts, merchant allies, and even arrangements with some Muslim leaders helped provide early warning of major threats. This network, documented in surviving Templar correspondence, allowed relatively small forces to protect vast areas through superior information rather than overwhelming numbers. As the afternoon progresses, you encounter a group of returning pilgrims, French merchants who completed their devotions in Jerusalem and are now heading home to Marseilles. Their leader, Master Jacques, bears the palm frond that marks him as a palmer, one who has successfully reached the holy city. His stories of the sacred sites kindle fresh enthusiasm in your charges, but his warnings about increased bandit activity on the road ahead heighten your vigilance. The exchange of information between traveling groups was crucial to medieval pilgrimage safety. News traveled with the caravans, which roads were secure, where water could be found, which local rulers were hostile or friendly. This informal communication network was as important to travelers' safety as any military patrol. Your sergeant reports that the packhorses are showing signs of fatigue, and Brother Marcus calls for a rest at a small oasis known as the Spring of the Dove. Here, beneath ancient palm trees, pilgrims refresh themselves while you and your fellow knights maintain a defensive perimeter. Even rest must be tactical, horses positioned for quick mounting, weapons kept within easy reach, sentries posted on the surrounding high ground. During the halt, you have a chance to speak with some of the pilgrims individually. Dame Margaret, a widow from England, tells you of the vow that brought her here, to pray for her husband's soul at the sight of Christ's crucifixion. Her faith is absolute, her determination humbling. She reminds you why your calling matters, why the hardships and dangers are worthwhile. Young Guillaume, a clerk from Paris, carries with him a carefully wrapped manuscript, a copy of the Gospels that he hopes to have blessed at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. His reverence for the sacred text reflects the medieval understanding that pilgrimage could sanctify not just the pilgrim, but their possessions as well. Holy relics acquired during pilgrimage were treasured for generations. The medical challenges of medieval pilgrimage were enormous. Brother Hospitaller Jean, traveling with your group, tends to everything from infected blisters to more serious ailments. Medieval pilgrimage accounts are filled with references to illness, injury, and death along the roads. The Templars worked closely with the Knights Hospitaller, whose medical expertise complemented Templar military protection. As the rest period ends and the column prepares to move, you notice storm clouds gathering on the eastern horizon. Weather was always a major concern for medieval travelers. Roads could become impassable quagmires, and exposure could kill as surely as any weapon. Your experience tells you the storm will reach your position within 2 hours. Brother Marcus makes the decision to push forward to the fortified caravanserai at Tel Dothan, rather than being caught in the open. The pace quickens, and you move up alongside the column to encourage stragglers. The elderly monk's determination impresses you. Despite his obvious exhaustion, he maintains the pace through sheer force of will. The first drops of rain begin to fall as the caravanserai's walls come into view. Built by the Hospitallers 50 years ago, it represents the infrastructure that made pilgrimage possible on this scale. Thick walls, defensible positions, wells for fresh water, and stabling for animals created safe havens along the dangerous roads. As your column passes through the gateway, you feel the satisfaction that comes from another mission accomplished. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new pilgrims to protect, new dangers to face. But tonight, these faithful souls will rest safely, one day closer to their sacred destination, protected by your vigilance and that of your brother knights. The rain begins in earnest as you see to your horse and equipment, but inside the caravanserai's common room, pilgrims share stories, compare experiences, and prepare for the final stage of their journey. Their voices rise in evening prayers, and you are reminded once again that your sword serves not conquest, but protection, not glory, but the humblest and most essential of services. The morning sun casts long shadows across the massive stone walls of Crac de Chevaliers as you walk the battlements on your watch duty. This mighty fortress, perhaps the greatest of all Templar strongholds, represents the culmination of medieval military architecture, a synthesis of engineering genius, strategic thinking, and unwavering faith carved into the living rock of the Syrian mountains. Your footsteps echo hollowly on the stone walkway as you pause at each crenellation, scanning the vast landscape spread below. From this vantage point, nearly 300 feet above the surrounding plain. You can see for miles in every direction. This is no accident. The castle was positioned here precisely for its commanding view of the crucial gap between the Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon mountain ranges, the main route between the coast and the interior. The fortress itself tells the story of Templar evolution from humble beginnings to military powerhouse. What started as a small fortification in 1110 had been expanded and strengthened over decades into this masterpiece of defensive architecture. Modern archaeological surveys have revealed that the castle as you know it represents at least 5 major building campaigns, each incorporating lessons learned from siege warfare. As you walk the outer ward, you pass the massive round towers that represent revolutionary advances in fortification design. Unlike the square keeps of earlier castles, these circular towers presented no vulnerable corners for siege engines to target. Their walls, in some places over 20 feet thick, could withstand the most powerful stone-throwing machines of the age. Brother Architect Fulk joins you on your rounds. A learned man who studied under the master builders of Chartres Cathedral before taking Templar vows, he explains how these walls were constructed. Each stone is cut to fit precisely with its neighbors, he says, running his weathered hand along a joint barely visible between massive blocks. No mortar could make them stronger than their own perfect fit. Recent archaeological analysis has confirmed the sophistication of Templar building techniques. The mortar used in Crac de Chevaliers was specially formulated with volcanic ash imported from Italy, creating bonds stronger than the stone itself. The builders incorporated flexible joints that allowed the structure to survive earthquakes that have leveled other fortifications. Your patrol route takes you past the Great Hall, where the architectural genius of the Templars is perhaps most evident. The hall can accommodate the castle's entire garrison of nearly 2,000 men, yet its soaring stone arches create acoustic properties that allow a speaker at one end to be clearly heard at the other. Medieval chroniclers noted that Templar commanders could address their entire force without shouting. The ingenuity extends to every aspect of the fortress design. The water system, fed by springs within the mountain itself, could supply the garrison indefinitely. Vast storerooms carved from the rock could hold supplies for years of siege. The stables could accommodate over 1,000 horses, essential for the mobile warfare that was the Templars' specialty. Brother Fulk leads you down into the chapel, the spiritual heart of the fortress. Here, beneath graceful Gothic arches, the garrison gathers for daily prayers. The acoustics are different here, designed to enhance the human voice in song and prayer rather than speech. Sunlight filters through stained glass windows depicting scenes from the life of Christ and the military saints, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor. The chapel serves as more than a place of worship, it's the symbolic and practical center of Templar life in the fortress. Here, new knights take their vows, here the community gathers for the most important decisions, here the bodies of fallen brothers are blessed before burial in the fortress cemetery carved into the mountainside. Archaeological excavations in Templar chapels throughout the Holy Land have revealed fascinating details about these warrior monks' spiritual life. Religious artifacts, manuscript fragments, and architectural features show how the Templars adapted traditional monastic practices to their unique circumstances. They created spaces for both communal and private devotion within the constraints of military architecture. Your tour continues to the fortress's most innovative feature, the massive bent entrance that forced any attacker to navigate a series of right-angle turns while under fire from defenders above. This entrance, an early example of what would later be called a barbican, could channel attackers into a deadly killing zone where archers and crossbowmen could pick them off at leisure. The defensive systems represent centuries of accumulated military wisdom. Murder holes in the ceilings allowed defenders to drop boiling oil or stones on attackers. Arrow loops were positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, ensuring no approach could be made safely. Even the stairs within the towers spiral clockwise, giving an advantage to right-handed defenders fighting downward. Brother Folk explains how the castle's design incorporated lessons from classical siege warfare. The Romans understood that fortifications must channel enemy forces where defenders want them, he notes, pointing to the clever arrangement of walls and towers. We have improved upon their methods, adding the innovations learned from fighting the Saracens. The influence worked both ways. Crusader fortifications borrowed extensively from Byzantine and Islamic military architecture. The talus slopes that deflect stone projectiles, the use of Greek fire projectors, the sophisticated counterweight trebuchets mounted on the walls, all represented the synthesis of military traditions from three civilizations. As your patrol continues, you encounter the daily life of the fortress community. In the blacksmith's workshop, built into the thickness of the walls, Master Robert shapes horseshoes and repairs weapons. The constant ringing of his hammer provides a rhythmic counterpoint to the sounds of training from the courtyard below. The forge fires never go out. A fortress this size requires constant maintenance of everything from horseshoes to hinges. The complexity of maintaining such a stronghold was enormous. Contemporary records from crack to chevaliers reveal the castle's annual consumption: thousands of tons of grain, wine enough for an army, oil for cooking and warfare, massive quantities of arrows, crossbow bolts, and other military supplies. The logistics of keeping such a fortress supplied required a network of supporting territories and careful financial management. In the scriptorium, Brother Librarian Thomas carefully copies military treatises and religious texts. This was another crucial function of major Templar fortresses. They served as repositories of knowledge, preserving everything from tactical manuals to theological works. Many classical texts survived the medieval period only because monks and scholar knights like Thomas dedicated their lives to copying and preserving them. The fortress also served as a center of intelligence gathering and diplomatic activity. Your afternoon brings a visit from Muslim merchants traveling under safe conduct, part of the complex web of relationships that made trade and even limited cooperation possible despite the ongoing warfare. These encounters required careful protocol, respect for customs while maintaining security, courtesy combined with vigilance. As evening approaches and you complete your watch duty, you climb to the highest tower to watch the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. From this height, you can see other Templar fortifications marking the horizon. A network of strongholds that formed the defensive backbone of the Crusader states. Each castle could signal to its neighbors using mirrors by day or fires by night, creating a communication system that spanned hundreds of miles. The view reminds you of the greater purpose these walls serve. This fortress is not merely a military installation, but a statement of faith made manifest in stone. It declares to all who see it that Christendom will not retreat, that there are those willing to dedicate their lives to holding this sacred ground. As the call to evening prayers echoes from the chapel bell, you make your way down the winding stone steps, past walls that have withstood everything enemies could devise, toward the community of brothers who share your calling. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight, within these mighty walls, you rest secure in the knowledge that you serve something greater than yourself. The fortress sleeps, but it never truly rests. Sentries pace the walls, the watch changes with military precision, and the great stones themselves seem to stand vigilant against the darkness, guardians of the faith that raised them. The horn sounds across the castle courtyard at first light, its urgent blast cutting through the morning prayers like a blade through silk. You know that sound, 3 long notes followed by 2 short ones. Enemy forces have been sighted approaching from the east. The siege of Crac des Chevaliers is about to begin. Around you, the castle transforms with the efficiency born of years of drill and preparation. Brother knights emerge from the chapel still fastening their sword belts, while sergeants race to their assigned positions on the walls. The great gates boom shut with the finality of a tomb ceiling, and the massive iron portcullis crashes down, its spear-like points embedding in the stone threshold. From your position on the eastern wall, you can see them now, a vast army spread across the plain like a dark tide. The banners of Saladin's nephew, Al-Malik al-Zahir, flutter in the morning breeze, surrounded by the standards of a dozen lesser emirs. Contemporary chronicles suggest this force numbers nearly 30,000 men, making it one of the largest armies ever assembled against a single crusader stronghold. Brother Commander Guillaume calls for the garrison to assemble in the great courtyard. His voice carries the calm authority that has sustained this fortress through 2 previous sieges. Brothers, he begins, his words echoing off the stone walls, we have trained for this moment our entire lives. Today we discover whether our preparation has been sufficient. The numbers are daunting, your garrison of 800 knights, sergeants, and Turcopoles faces odds of nearly 40 to 1. Yet there is no despair in the faces around you, only the grim determination that has made the Templars legendary. These walls have never fallen to assault, and by God's grace and your strong arms, they will not fall today. The siege begins with the systematic approach that marks Saladin's family as master strategists. Rather than costly frontal assaults, the besiegers establish a series of camps surrounding the castle, effectively cutting off all supply lines and communication with the outside world. This is to be a siege of patience and engineering rather than blood and heroics. Archaeological evidence from medieval siege sites reveals the sophistication of Islamic siege warfare during this period. The attacking army brings with it a full complement of military engineers, many trained in the mathematical traditions of Baghdad and Damascus. They begin construction of massive stone-throwing machines, their timber frames rising like gibbets against the sky. Your daily routine adapts to the rhythm of siege warfare. Dawn brings the morning office as always, but now it's followed by weapons inspection and defensive preparations. The great crossbows mounted on the walls must be checked, their massive strings examined for signs of wear. Stocks of crossbow bolts, counted and recounted, represent the difference between successful defense and catastrophic defeat. Brother Armorer Peter has transformed his workshop into a weapon factory. The constant sound of hammering now carries a desperate urgency as he and his assistants work around the clock to repair damaged equipment and craft additional projectiles. Medieval sieges were often decided by logistics. Whichever side ran out of supplies first usually lost. The psychological warfare begins almost immediately. The besiegers parade captured crusader banners before the walls, claim that relief forces have been defeated, and promise generous terms for surrender. Some defenders waver, but Commander Guillaume's response is unwavering, our trust is in God, not in the promises of infidels. The first serious assault comes on the 3rd day, a coordinated attack using massive wheeled towers that allow infantry to approach the walls at parapet level. These siege towers, described in detail by contemporary military treatises, represented sophisticated engineering. They had to be tall enough to overtop the walls, strong enough to support scores of armed men, and mobile enough to be moved into position despite defensive fire. Your position on the wall gives you a clear view of the approaching tower. It's an impressive sight, nearly 60 feet tall, constructed of heavy timber and covered with fresh hides to protect against fire arrows. Inside, you can see the gleam of armor as assault troops prepare for the moment when the bridge drops and combat becomes hand-to-hand. The Templar response demonstrates the tactical innovations that made them so effective. Rather than waiting passively for the attack, teams of knights sortie from hidden posterns to attack the tower's foundations while it's still being maneuvered into position. These raids, requiring perfect timing and coordination, exemplify the aggressive defense that was a Templar specialty. Brother Thomas leads one such sortie, 20 knights in full armor charging from a concealed gate to strike at the siege tower's supporting ropes. The assault is brief but devastating. Greek fire pots shatter against the tower's base, setting the lower stories ablaze. The structure, which took days to construct, becomes a funeral pyre in minutes. Yet the enemy adapts quickly. The next assault employs a different strategy, massive catapults that hurl not stones but clay pots filled with naphtha, the medieval equivalent of napalm. These incendiary projectiles explode against the walls in sheets of flame, forcing defenders back from the ramparts and creating opportunities for more conventional attacks. The siege engines represent a culmination of medieval military engineering. The great trebuchets, some with arms over 50 feet long, can hurl stones weighing 300 pounds with devastating accuracy. When they strike the walls, the entire castle seems to shudder, ancient stones groaning under impacts that would have been impossible to imagine when the fortress was first built. Your own combat experience comes during the fourth week of siege, when enemy miners finally break through into the castle's lower levels. The fighting in the tunnels is unlike anything you've trained for. Close quarters combat in absolute darkness, where the sound of breathing might be your only warning of an enemy's approach. The underground battle becomes a deadly game of move and countermove. Muslim engineers dig toward the foundation of the Great Tower while Templar miners work frantically to intercept them. The sound of pickaxes echoes through the rock like the heartbeat of some massive stone creature. You descend into these tunnels with Brother Marcus and a handful of sergeants, your torches casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The air is thick and stifling, filled with rock dust that makes breathing difficult. Every few yards you pause, listening for the sounds that would indicate enemy diggers breaking through from their side. The encounter, when it comes, is brutal and brief. Enemy miners break through into your counter-tunnel with a crash of falling stone. In the confined space, sword work is impossible. This is fighting with daggers and bare hands, each man struggling in the claustrophobic darkness for the chance to strike a killing blow. Brother Marcus falls beside you, a Turkish dagger finding the gap beneath his arm where his mail doesn't overlap. His blood, black in the torchlight, soaks into the dusty stone as you drag him back toward your own lines. These are the moments that test not just your martial skills, but your very soul, watching good men die in darkness, far from the clean combat of the tournament ground. The siege drags on through the summer months, each day bringing new challenges and innovations from both sides. The besiegers construct a massive stone-throwing engine called Malvoisin, the bad neighbor, whose stones are so large they must be carved on-site from local quarries. When this monster finally opens fire, its projectiles punch completely through the outer wall, creating breaches that must be frantically repaired under constant bombardment. Yet the defenders adapt with equal ingenuity. Brother Engineer Robert devises a system of heavy mantlets, portable shields that can be moved to protect repair crews working on the walls. The castle's forges work day and night to produce caltrops, iron spikes that can disable enemy siege equipment. Most ingenious of all, the Templars begin launching their own projectiles, not stones, but containers of Greek fire that turn enemy siege works into infernos. The psychological toll of prolonged siege becomes evident as autumn approaches. Men who began the defense with cheerful confidence now move with the hollow-eyed exhaustion of those pushed beyond normal human endurance. The constant noise, the crash of stone on stone, the screams of wounded men, the endless hammering of repairs, creates a kind of madness that threatens to break even the strongest will. Food becomes a critical concern as the siege enters its 5th month. The great storerooms that seemed so well supplied in peacetime now echo with emptiness. Rations are reduced, then reduced again. Horses, the knight's most precious possessions, must be slaughtered to provide meat for the garrison. Each meal becomes a careful calculation of survival versus strength needed for defense. Brother Hospitaller Jean works miracles with medicinal herbs grown in the castle's garden, but even his skills cannot overcome the simple mathematics of attrition. Wounds that should heal cleanly become infected in men weakened by hunger. Diseases spread through the close quarters of the fortress like wildfire through dry grass. Yet through it all, the rhythm of prayer continues unchanged. If anything, the divine offices become more important during the siege, providing the spiritual anchor that keeps the garrison from despair. The chapel, despite the constant danger from bombardment, remains the heart of castle life. Men who may not live to see another dawn still gather to chant the ancient words that connect them to something eternal. The breakthrough, when it comes, happens not through engineering or assault, but through treachery. A Turco-Pole sergeant, driven to desperation by the death of his son in the tunnel fighting, agrees to open a postern gate in exchange for safe passage for his remaining family. The betrayal is discovered at the last moment, but not before a small enemy force has gained entry to the lower ward. The fighting that follows is everything medieval combat at its most desperate. No room for mounted charges or formal challenges. This is hand-to-hand combat in courtyards and corridors, where a man's life depends on his skill with sword and shield, his endurance, and God's grace. You find yourself back-to-back with Brother Guillaume, fighting off waves of attackers while trying to reach the great hall where the remaining garrison has established its final defense. The scene sears itself into memory, the clash of steel echoing from stone walls, the acrid smell of burning thatch from the wooden buildings within the castle, the faces of enemy warriors lit by flames as they press forward over the bodies of their fallen comrades. This is warfare stripped of all romance, reduced to its essential brutality. Commander Guillaume's voice rises above the din of battle. Remember your vows, brothers. We are the shield of Christendom. His words, somehow, cut through the chaos and exhaustion. Men who seemed ready to collapse find new strength, forming a defensive line that holds despite impossible odds. The final assault on the Great Hall is repelled at terrible cost. Of the 800 men who began the siege, fewer than 200 remain capable of fighting. Yet they have held. The walls, though scarred and breached in places, still stand. The Red Cross banner still flies from the highest tower, visible for miles across the plain. As winter approaches and the attacking army shows signs of withdrawal, you realize that victory sometimes looks very much like defeat. The fortress has survived, but at a price that will take years to recover. Most of your brother knights lie buried in the castle cemetery, their graves marked with simple crosses carved from the same stone they died defending. The siege finally ends not with dramatic assault or triumphant relief, but with the quiet departure of an enemy army that can no longer sustain the costs of prolonged investment. Saladin's nephew strikes his tents in the pre-dawn darkness, leaving behind siege engines too massive to transport and the graves of thousands of his own men. Standing on the walls in the gray light of dawn, you survey a transformed landscape. Where once green fields stretched to the horizon, now there is only scarred earth, the debris of siege works, and the occasional glint of metal from abandoned equipment. The siege has ended, but both victory and defeat have left their marks on everything they touched. Yet as the chapel bell calls the survivors to morning prayer, you feel not despair but a strange sense of completion. You have been tested by fire and steel, have faced the ultimate trial of your calling, and have not been found wanting. The fortress stands, the faith endures, and somewhere in the distance, new pilgrims will soon walk the roads you have died to keep open. The parchment crackles in your weathered hands as you read the fateful words one more time. The year is 1307, and the letter bears the seal of King Philip IV of France. Its contents will change everything you have ever known. God is not pleased. We have enemies of the faith in the kingdom. You are no longer the young knight who once rode the pilgrim roads of the Holy Land. Decades of service have grayed your hair and lined your face, but they have not dimmed your devotion to the order. Now, as you sit in the commandery library at Temple, Paris, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of 2 centuries, you find yourself witness to the twilight of the Knights Templar. The signs had been accumulating for years, like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon. The fall of Acre in 1291 had ended the Crusader presence in the Holy Land, leaving the military orders without their original purpose. The Templars had adapted, becoming Europe's premier banking organization, but this very success had bred new enemies among those who owed them money. Brother Librarian Augustine joins you in the scriptorium, his arms full of manuscripts and ledgers. At 83, he is among the oldest surviving members of the order, having served in the Holy Land during the final campaigns. His memories span the entire arc of Templar history, from the glory days of Hattin's aftermath to this darkening present. I remember when we were poor soldiers, he says, settling carefully into his chair. We owned nothing but our horses and our faith. Perhaps we should have stayed that way. His words carry the weight of accumulated wisdom, the hard-earned understanding that comes from watching an entire world transform. The ledgers before you tell the story of that transformation. What began as a small band of knights protecting pilgrims had evolved into medieval Europe's most sophisticated financial institution. Templar banks facilitated trade from London to Constantinople, their letters of credit more trusted than royal currency. Kings and merchants alike depended on Templar financial services. This success, ironically, may have sealed the order's fate. Recent scholarship by historians like Malcolm Barber suggests that King Philip IV's attack on the Templars was primarily motivated by his desperate need for money to fund his wars and his resentment of the order's independence and wealth. The accusations of heresy and corruption were pretexts for what was essentially a massive robbery. Brother Augustine carefully opens one of the order's most precious manuscripts, a copy of the Rule of the Temple with annotations by Hugh de Payens, the order's first Grand Master. The parchment is brown with age, its Latin text written in the careful hand of a 12th-century scribe. This document represents the foundation upon which your entire life has been built. We tried to live by these words, Augustine says, his finger tracing lines written 2 centuries ago. Poverty, chastity, obedience. Service to God and protection of pilgrims. We may have lost sight of some ideals, but never the essential ones. His voice carries conviction despite the gathering darkness outside. The accusations leveled against the order seem almost absurd to those who have lived the Templar life. Heresy. Idol worship. Corruption. These charges come from men who have never risen for matins, never risked their lives for strangers, never taken vows that subordinated personal desire to divine service. Yet the machinery of persecution grinds forward regardless of truth. You think of your brothers scattered across France, arrested on that terrible Friday, October 13th. Some, were broken by torture and made false confessions to end their suffering. Others, like the brave knights who died rather than renounce their vows, chose martyrdom over compromise. Each faced the same choice: abandon everything they had lived for, or die as witnesses to their faith. The library around you represents one of medieval Europe's great intellectual treasures. Templar commanderies served as repositories of knowledge, preserving everything from military treatises to philosophical works, from agricultural manuals to architectural plans. Much of this learning will be lost, scattered to the winds when the order is dissolved. Brother Augustine shows you a map of the Holy Land, its vellum surface marked with the locations of Templar castles and commanderies. Crac des Chevaliers, where you served in your youth, is marked with a small red cross. Tortosa, Atlit, Chateau Pellerin, each name evokes memories of brothers who lived, fought, and died in service to their calling. We held the line for 200 years, Augustine reflects, his finger tracing the coastal fortifications that once protected Christendom's easternmost frontier. 200 years of service, sacrifice, and devotion. That counts for something, regardless of what happens to us now. The evening light streaming through the library windows grows dim as autumn approaches its end. Soon, these halls will echo empty, their books dispersed, their stones perhaps torn down to build something more prosaic. Yet what the Templars represented, the ideal of service, the marriage of faith and action, the commitment to something greater than self, cannot be destroyed by royal decree. You begin to understand that endings are also beginnings. The formal dissolution of the Knights Templar will not end the human need for the virtues they embodied. Other orders will arise, other men will take vows of service, other institutions will try to balance worldly effectiveness with spiritual purpose. The specific organization may die, but the ideal it represented is eternal. Contemporary records suggest that many Templars simply disappeared into other religious orders or secular life rather than face persecution. They took with them centuries of accumulated knowledge, military, architectural, financial, and spiritual. This expertise would influence European development for generations, even if its Templar origins were forgotten. Brother Augustine closes the ancient manuscript and looks directly at you. What we were completely, he says with quiet dignity. No half measures, no compromises, no reserves held back. Whether that was wisdom or folly, history will judge. But we served with our whole hearts. As the chapel bell calls for vespers one final time in this place, you join the handful of remaining brothers for what may be your last communal prayer in a Templar commandery. The familiar words take on new meaning now. Into your hands I commend my spirit. It is both surrender and defiance, an acceptance of mortal defeat and an assertion of eternal victory. The service ends, and you walk slowly through corridors you may never see again. Each stone, each archway, each carefully crafted detail represents the devotion of craftsmen who built for eternity. The physical structures may crumble, but what inspired them, the human hunger for transcendence, for meaning, for service to something greater than self, will endure. Outside, the first snow of winter begins to fall, covering the commandery grounds with pristine white. The color reminds you of the Templar mantle you have worn with pride for decades. White for purity, red for sacrifice, symbols that will outlive the organization that created them. As you prepare for whatever comes next, you carry with you not bitterness but gratitude. You have lived a life of purpose, served a cause worthy of devotion, and witnessed both the heights and depths of human nature. The order that shaped you may be ending, but the man it created will endure, carrying its values into whatever future awaits. The snow continues to fall as you extinguish the library lamps one final time. In the darkness, you whisper the ancient prayer that has sustained Templars for 2 centuries, Non nobis, Domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but to your name give glory. Tomorrow will bring uncertainty, perhaps danger, certainly change. But tonight, you rest in the knowledge that you have been part of something magnificent, an attempt to live perfectly, to serve completely, to transform the world through the power of absolute commitment. That such attempts must sometimes fail does not diminish their nobility or their necessity. The last embers die in the fireplace as winter settles over the commandery, but in your heart burns a flame that no earthly power can extinguish, the flame of faith, service, and brotherhood that has illuminated 8 centuries and will continue to inspire humanity as long as there are those willing to pledge their lives to ideals greater than themselves.